All right.
All
I'm
right.
so excited to do this with you. We were just chatting before we hit record and catching up. It's been a little bit since we lived together in the
It's been
same
a bit.
town. Yeah.
hmm
So excited to have you here, Amanda. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
Very excited to be here and talk about the thing that consumes our lives.
Oh my gosh, that's exactly it. So, yeah, so before we dive into that, well, it's related. I like to start off every episode by asking this kind of reflective question of when you think of your upbringing, how do you feel like that's impacted your, like how you see the world today? I know it can
Sports
go be deep,
specific or world
just in
specific?
general. Yeah. So like cultural upbringing and background and how that's kind of shaped, how do you feel like that's shaped how you see the world and who you've become?
I think personally, it's funny. I just went back to like my high school for like another induction ceremony, and um, just community, like community and people. And I feel
Mm,
like when I think of my upbringing, it's mainly and how I see the world, it's really
yeah.
mainly about the relationships that I have created and the people I've met along the way. Like to me, that is everything.
Hmm.
And when going back, kind of to where I grew up this past weekend, just how people along the way have impacted like my life
Hmm.
that I never really you wouldn't think at that time, say I'm going to use high school as an example,
Yeah.
that all of those, things, how they carry with you for good or for bad, or but how much of a supportive environment I was in, but how that really has shaped, you know, who I am, and how I see the world because of the relationships and the connection to people, right?
Hmm.
So for me, that's what it's all about. Every day it's the people we encounter that
Hmm.
either kind of, whether you want to say fill our cup up or delete our cup, but it's those relationships that have made me want, also to be put that energy out into the world,
Hmm.
right? Because I think our relationships shape everything,
Totally. And that
shape
is
our
like, and
experience.
they're real. So I think that
Yes.
like missing you in the day to day, like seeing you, right? Like
Yeah.
driving by and that, like, I
Yes.
remember I was thinking back to where we first met. And I think the first interaction was we were new to the town and I think you came in soon after us, but it was at Gym Fest.
Yes, I
And
remember that. And I already knew who you were because I was looking at Rob's, position, and I
yeah.
read it talked about you in it. And
It was so, yeah, and
like,
we were like young, our kids are young at that age, right? And just
yeah.
the instant that makes so much sense to me what you're sharing, because I feel that from you, like that just realness and this connection. It's so palpable. Yeah. So
Yes,
thank you
yes.
for sharing that. Yeah. And you're dynamic, and you also, as I have identical twins, you have identical twin sisters, right? So like,
Yes, fraternal twin sisters.
or
Yes.
fraternal twin
Little
sisters.
different, but very similar.
Got you. Yeah. And
Yeah.
so, and growing up in that dynamic, and so, we were talking a little bit before we hit record. How do you feel like what role did sport have in your lives growing up when it came to your
So
home?
yeah, so it's funny, growing up, my dad played college hockey, right? And he played like semi-pro hockey. So from a young, that was kind of a big part of our life because we would go, he played like, men's league,
Mm,
and we would go to his games, right? My mom also like got up every morning and ran, and then my dad like ran marathons, and we would go to all of his races. And so
mhm,
just in general, like sport was a part of our life. And then, we did the classic town soccer, my sisters and I.
mm,
And it's funny because I still think of like, we were into sports. We all dabbled a little bit in softball, but, it was seventh grade. This is, back in the 90s, the
mhm,
sports were different. Where, okay, you hit middle school, modified sports, and now it's time to pick. Do you want to do
mhm,
cross country or do you want to play soccer? And I remember my sisters ran cross country, and my sister, they went to their first meet. My parents didn't go, right? Which I don't know why, they probably didn't think it was that big of a deal.
mhm.
And my sister came home, she's like, "Oh, I won." And they're like, "What?" And then she won everything after that. And so, when it was my turn, I'm 17 months younger, but like 2 grades. When I hit seventh grade, of course, I chose running.
Mm,
My first season, was painful.
mm,
And I didn't do one race. I did well. I came in third, and I was like, how did that happen?
mm,
I don't know how it happened, but felt good. It didn't happen again for the rest of the season. But getting into shape hurt so bad that I was that kid who went home every day and ran because I didn't want to get the cramps. I didn't want that to come back in 8th grade when I did it again. So when I went out for the team in 8th grade, I won everything. And I think just out of default, because I was in such good shape because I ran the whole time. And so that manifested into, my sister's career. With my other sister also ran. She, had her own path. She was good too. She wasn't the older twin. She was great, right? I mean, she was an All-American. She had the fastest time in the mile in the country when she was in high school. Like, she was a great runner. My other sister was good. She's the only one who has an NCAA ECAC ring from Providence College, but it just shaped everything. And it became our life, right?
Yeah.
It was something that we started to do, and then it just became a part of who we are. And all of us today, still run. I don't think any of us ever thought of sport that way or thought that was going to happen. I mean, it's kind of like insane when I think back. And the one nice thing about running is a time, right? So,
oh my gosh, please preach to me.
Oh my
goodness.
So
yes.
that is, it's something that can hold through time, right? Like, a lot of people might look back at some sports, like, we'll get into hockey, but how, hockey back in the day is nothing like hockey is now.
Right.
Like, it's a game, but running's running. It's a time, swimming, it's a time. So, but it is amazing how that, it became kind of everything.
Yeah.
And an identity, right?
And did you know that is it fair to say you were pulled by your sisters, like kind of following their track, or did you love running for running?
I wasn't really good at soccer either. I think I like the individualness. I like, when you play soccer, when you go to practice, you got to be kind of like locked in. I always kind of felt that was boring. With running, you go do your run and you're done and you can have fun. Yeah. So it was like fun before the run, fun after the fun. And so it really kind of fit more my personality. Yeah. And I did actually continue to play spring soccer, just because, but, and I actually think it helped my running a little bit, but, I just wasn't very good at it. I wasn't good at, I tried out one winter for basketball. I think in middle school I got cut. Yeah. But, I look back and I'm kind of proud of myself that, I'm really short, that, I even tried, right. And, getting cut wasn't that big of a deal. I actually think those things are good things.
Now
right?
we know, especially as parents, but in the moment, right? That's so challenging. Yeah. So that idea. And so because you wear the piece of this in preparing for the podcast conversation with you is like, what do we focus on? Because you bring so many different perspectives, right? You bring this perspective as an athlete at competing at a high level and making, going through college. And then you have a sport mom, right, of boys, 3 boys who are, right, excelling in their own right. And then you are, right, your sister-in-law to someone who's played in Major League Baseball. And then you have strength and conditioning coach, right? Then you have what you're doing now in the wellness and fitness space and coaching and what that means. So, that just you can't really separate them. I think all of them shape your lens. But when you think about your career, and so take us through college and then kind of a pivot into your career and what inspired the work that you do, because it's still deeply connected to sport and movement. Yeah.
So college was interesting. I did not do well in college. I have a nice ACC ring, but I did not really do well. But what I realized, it's funny, with women, this is a whole nother topic, our bodies go through a lot of changes, right? And so, I got heavier, right? As a woman, and, no one told you in the 90s, right, that this is what's happening to your body. You have a new body now, so now you need to adjust accordingly. And instead, you create the narrative and you're like, oh, I'm just not good anymore. I might be at a Division I college, but I'm not running the way I should be running. And, also we had the coach I went there for left within the first week. Now he stayed on campus as an academic athletic advisor but we all know how coaching is. He had young kids and he wanted to be around, and this way he could kind of, be in the athletic department and stuff, but without having to travel and all that. So we went through like a series of coaches the whole time, I think we had maybe 4 distance coaches.
Oh, wow. In
So that
4
was
years.
also
Yeah.
challenging. Yeah, and that was
Wow.
challenging. Even like the sprint coaches, like they ended up leaving too with new people coming in. So that was hard. So I wouldn't say I had a great experience. Oh, I got a stress fracture my freshman year
Mm.
too in my femur. And I really kind of started to like reevaluate my relationship with running.
Mhm.
And so I was actually there for 5 years. So my fifth year, I decided, like, I'm not doing anything, right? I'm not even going to walk. Like, I'm done. Like, I was so kind of burnt out, and
Burnt.
not just burnt out from the sport, but burnt out mentally and
Totally.
emotionally
Mhm.
of like the obsession. And all of a sudden, like, I think it was the spring of my fifth year, I was kind of like, oh, something's kind of missing. And I started to run, walk a little bit. And then, college ends, I come home, apply for jobs. And I did end up, with my first coaching job. But anyway, to make a long story short, when I got that first job, I wasn't even running yet. And then I met, my husband, who was hired as the, assistant cross country and track coach. And he was like, hey, you want to go for a run? And he was the first. This is kind of fascinating. When I had my stress fracture, I learned how to get back into shape.
Mhm.
But no one really teaches you how to get, like, when you start in seventh grade, you're a little thing, you just do it. But
Mm.
how to really get back into shape.
Mhm.
And sometimes I look back at my experience, like even in high school, like, my senior spring, I didn't do as good, but I had an injury, I had ankle injuries, and I was like, oh, I just wasn't in shape.
Mm.
Like the way I needed to be in shape. But if
Mhm.
someone sat down and had that conversation with me,
Mhm.
it wouldn't have been so emotional.
Yeah.
Someone's like, oh, honey, you're just not in shape.
Yeah. Well, and
We
then
can
how
get
do I
you
help
there.
you?
Oh, all
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. Well,
So I
the
think,
space leaves so much room for storytelling internally,
oh,
and
yeah.
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 So if you could go back to that, like knowing what you know now and your background, I'll have it in the intro so people are here, like the background in strength and conditioning, and just like
Yeah.
the area and space you're so firmly planted in is wellness and
Yeah.
fitness and health. And so, what
Hmm.
would like if you could go back and to that seventh grade version of you, or even through college, like what would you provide her? Like, because you think about the parents that are kind of alongside and maybe seeing some of the same things as they're listening to you, like, oh, I'm noticing that, or the stress fracture, right?
Yeah.
Like the injuries that are accumulating. Huh, interesting. Yeah. So
Yeah.
what would you say?
Just like sports like waves, it's just going to ebb and flow. And you just have to, I think, more having an awareness,
Mm-hmm.
instead of sometimes you think, did I do something wrong?
Mm-hmm.
Did my body is, doesn't trust me anymore. My body's working against me, right? But
Mm-hmm.
just knowing that it's a part of sport. You're
Mm-hmm.
not always supposed to feel good.
Yeah.
It's like sometimes you're going to have a workout and you're going to feel really good. Sometimes you're going to have one, you're not going to feel good.
Mm-hmm.
But that's a part of it. It's all part of the big picture. And so
Mm-hmm.
you don't have to get too worried or scared, and just having someone to kind of work you through it, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, it
In the
doesn't have to,
space.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It felt so personal,
Yeah.
kind of. And that's just how your body is. It's not supposed to be 100% all the time.
And when it's going through all those changes, right? So like for the
Yeah.
parents that are listening with young girls in particular, right? We think about that the growth and development. And then when they're getting into the college age, like so end of high school where hips are widening, like the
Yeah.
natural
Yeah.
progression of the woman's body versus the
Mhm.
male body, right? Continuing to pump out higher levels of
Yeah.
testosterone and
Yeah.
development through college. Like embrace. So I hear in this like a zooming out to gain
Yeah.
perspective and understanding that as part of the process, and almost a level of acceptance and then curiosity around like, well, what if instead of just blaming yourself or railing
Yeah.
against your body, it's like,
Mhm.
how could I respond to this? Is
Yeah.
what I'm hearing. Is
Yeah.
that fair to say what I'm hearing? Like,
Oh yes, yeah, especially with women, right? Our
yeah,
bodies change, and I think in my experience, a lot of women's bodies change again in college,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
And then you have another cycle kind of after college, right? So
And then
just
it
being
just keeps on
aware of
going.
that.
So we
Yeah,
talk about raising
right?
kids now. We're like,
Yeah,
oh,
our bodies
yeah,
are always
always
changing, and that's
changing.
a part of life, and that's a part of,
Yeah,
being a woman. So,
yeah.
and not, and I worry about some parents too. like they might get, when parents are really into their kids sports and
Yes.
stuff, especially girls and running, to be specific, like
Mm-hmm.
if you look at a freshman body compared to a senior body, they look totally different.
Mm-hmm.
They just do. And so just not I get nervous when like parents get nervous about like the body changing and how that's going to affect performance. And
Yeah. So
you
what would you
know
speak to them? Like, what would you say? Like, if you could like breathe life and love into those parents that are worried or kind of getting hooked on that, what would you say?
well, there's like a learning curve, right,
Mm-hmm.
for anything. So sometimes there's some adjustments, adjustments to training, right? There's those kind
Mm-hmm.
of adjustments, but just letting the body kind of go through it,
Mm-hmm.
and that it'll come back around,
Mm-hmm.
right? But you might have these a little, sometimes like a setback. I'm going to say maybe you're like your junior year or something like that,
Mm-hmm.
right? When the body's changing, but then you get used to your body like anything in life, and
Mm-hmm.
then get bumped up again.
Yeah.
But it's just that's normal, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not abnormal, and it doesn't also mean that it's
It's
over.
being patient in that process too.
Being
Yeah.
patient,
Yeah.
yes.
And
Hmm.
and that like part of this, the intention behind the podcast is like acknowledging that those like places and spaces as humans, like we're parents, we care about our kids, like we are like when they hurt, we hurt, right? It's like
Yeah.
being able to acknowledge that that's real, that we get hooked into these places, like that a part of our work as parents is recognizing when we are hooked into those places
Hmm.
and being
Yeah.
able to learn skills to like unhook and let our
Hmm.
kids journey unfurl. But that's real. Like I
Yeah.
can relate when you're saying like a parent who's kind of worried through conversations I've had in my own experience of
Yeah.
just like, yeah, like we're human and we like, especially if you care about, you're wanting to support your kid and they're on this journey. And let's say they've had early success. I see this a lot in swim,
Yes.
similar to
Yeah.
running. And then all of a sudden people are growing, hitting puberty at different spaces. And it's like, well, what happened to my kid? There's almost like a level of panic, right?
Hmm.
Yeah. And so that place, I love that, being patient, zooming out and trusting that things will find. I love, and for those listening, like Amanda's moving her hand in this wave of like up and down, right? Like that's
Yeah.
part of the process. Yeah.
I have to just add, like right now I'm on the other end because I have boys, and it's
Yeah.
all about puberty and height.
Yeah.
With women, it's about body, shape or size. With boys, it's about height, and it's a
Yeah.
whole
Speak
nother
to that.
level.
Anything you would want to
Well, it's
share
hard. I got one tall boy and two shorties.
for now, right? Yeah.
For
Yeah.
now,
Right.
right? But
Yeah.
it is amazing with boys, and I think because I'm from a family of all girls, just not paying attention to puberty.
Mm-hmm.
Some boys hit puberty in sixth grade, some hit, seventh, eighth, ninth, tenth. Some grow through
Mm-hmm.
high school, some still grow in college, and so it is amazing because the boys who do hit puberty early have an earlier advantage. Like
Mm-hmm.
just where we live,
Mm-hmm.
we live in such a small area that if you are bigger, you have potential of being bumped up
Mm-hmm.
to play at a higher level because you have the size,
Mm-hmm.
right? And they need bodies, right? So
Mm-hmm.
sometimes, so it can be, with my boys, my middle and my youngest, just kind of waiting. You can see them waiting for like, well, when is it my turn?
Mm-hmm.
And my middle son, he did actually hit puberty this year and has grown, and his confidence is like skyrocketed,
Mm-hmm.
and which is great. But at the same time, it's like you want that confidence, like I might be raising short kings,
Mm-hmm.
like
Mm-hmm. Real.
I got a
Yes.
taller husband and I'm short. So,
Mm-hmm.
but you want that to be there regardless. But it's interesting just, for the first time really seeing how it's hit.
Well, up front, I mean, I think
Yeah.
that's the whole, like, we're
Yeah.
watching these journeys unfold in real time from the front row with no real playbook. There's not
Yeah.
really, right? We're learning
Yeah.
as we go. And the transition, so after college, transitioning into the space of coaching and then in sports performance, and that's kind of transition. And so like combining all of that, right? Like just the lens with which you see the world. One of the questions that I'd love to just kind of ping off you is, what are we getting right? Like when we think of like the sport parenting journey collectively, like where are we moving the needle in a way that's more aligned and it's serving our kids and creating like that kind of combination of opening the door for higher levels of performance and also health and well-being. And then the opposite of that, we can go into that, is like, where are we missing in your opinion? Yeah.
Well, I mean, I love sports and I think sports are great for kids. I mean, I think, I can speak to my kids whenever they're done doing a sport, they're always happier, right? They're chatty in the car. They
Gosh,
talk
that's
to me
so
on the way
true.
home. They've got that, kind of runner's high going
Hmm.
on. And so the relationships that they're building. I think
Hmm.
one of the biggest things for my kids is, you have to put yourself out there,
Hmm.
right? So as crazy as, we can say some club sports are, or the travel, this and that, my kids like having, having to drop them off and they have to
Hmm.
get to the locker room by themselves in a room of kids they don't know.
Totally.
I think that has probably been the biggest thing that I have that they have received from doing some of these things. They're
Totally.
constantly having to put themselves out there
Hmm.
and feeling all the feelings, right?
Hmm.
That they're going to feel in life when they go for a job, when they,
Hmm.
anything they do. They're going to relate to that feeling they felt when they stepped out there to try out for a new team, or
Hmm.
it's test day, how to prepare,
Totally.
right? Like life is about preparation.
Hmm.
So I think we're still getting all of that kind of stuff right. I mean, I feel like sports is can be a great teacher,
Mm.
and I think also learning how to balance, like,
Mm.
balance school, balance sport, balance it all. I mean, once again, there's that fine line, but I do think, making time for that, right? So,
Mhm,
like when they're older, whether it's a sport or whether it's like, oh, I'm making time to exercise, I'm making time to go
mhm,
skiing, I'm making time for, that part of my life. I think that's what we're getting right.
mhm.
Um,
I'm so with you. One of the
yeah,
like wildest moments was for me in that like that exact situation of dropping Kylie off for her first like summer hockey game where she knew not a soul and she was
yeah,
like walking into the locker room
right,
and going
yeah,
to join this team and I was like, wow, like I as a swimmer you put your cap and goggles on and really didn't need to communicate. You just listen
yeah,
to the coach and could just do the workout. And so in that way, like as somebody that's playing a team sport, having to, yeah,
hmm,
do that. So I'm with you there. So the opportunity, like what sports providing is still there. It's real and true.
yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
Where do you think that we're like getting in the way and or getting it wrong? Like we're kind of sliding off to a space where it's maybe a little, it's becoming a liability more than it is bringing joy and lessons.
Well, I mean, I just think the whole sports world and culture at a young age is just different now. And I think it's unfortunate. I mean, part of me wishes we could go back when you only played your sport during that season. Because
Hmm.
I think there's still something to be said for being a multi sport athlete,
Hmm.
just physiologically, right? Sometimes too, you don't develop till you're later. You might give up a sport that you might
Mm.
end up being your sport, but you
Hmm.
don't know because you had to give it up. So I think it's gone too far where you play a sport year round.
Hmm.
I think it's hard too, especially if you have a kid that's like, this is all I want to do year round. I mean, I
Hmm.
think that's a little bit different because then sometimes you're like, oh, thank God, let's let the other ones go,
Yeah,
right?
this is their drive.
But
They're
yeah,
driving it though. It's not.
yeah.
Yeah. How do you bring that to the ground though? Because I mean, I like the boys have played multiple sports and travel. Like how, like what does that look like? How have you
Well, like,
found your way while
I
still
mean,
honoring
listen,
what matters to you?
we
Yeah.
so we do not have balance in my household. So, they all play three sports,
Mm.
which I think is great. It's important. But where we kind of teeter that line is we don't just play our school sports, they do club and everything.
Mm.
So, what happens is in the fall, they tend to mainly play school soccer or
Hmm.
town soccer and club soccer. The club soccer games are in Boston, so they
Oh
tend to
wow.
be three
Which
hours
is three
away. They're
hours
on
away. Yeah,
Sundays.
for people that don't
Uh
know.
huh.
Yep. Yep.
Yep. And then in the middle of the fall, we start to dabble in maybe one hockey practice a week,
Hmm.
right? Or if we can pick up a skills session. And then, we still, different than most, we are like abnormal compared to most hockey families. Um, because in our specific area there's no like AAA hockey. You would have to
Hmm.
travel to do AAA hockey, and our rink is on a third floor, so it can't
Which is
open
just
till
like
November.
pause. It's like
It's on the third
lugging.
floor,
You're bringing
and
back memories.
yeah,
Reese I was carrying her on my chest, and the twins were too little to carry their bags,
yeah.
so I was carrying both on, like, so two bags and a baby. Like, I can't. Up 3 flights with no elevator. Oh
And
my gosh.
if the temperature's above 50,
Yes.
there's no ice.
Right.
So
Yeah.
that kind of was a gift, that we couldn't start our season till November.
Real, because it boundaried itself. Yep.
Yes. So, now it's like hockey's in the winter,
Mm-hmm.
and we pretty much only do the hockey. They do ski. We're only
Mm-hmm.
20 minutes from the mountain. If they have like a Wednesday night is like a free night, I drop them off to ski. And then baseball, but the hockey now tends to go into middle or end of March.
Mm-hmm.
And this is kind of what we've done in the past. We are kind of currently doing something different, and I'll touch on that and in the future. And then baseball starts. And so
Yep.
they play school baseball. But the problem with spring's our worst season, is you have spring soccer, you have school baseball, and you have spring hockey. So what happens is, for some reason where we are, there's not a lot of school competitions on the weekend. It's during the week, but that'll give you the space for a hockey tournament on the weekend.
On the weekend. Yeah.
And you can dip in and dip out in different games. So you don't have to commit for the whole weekend. You might be like, you just only play Saturday, or I can play this game and that game. And then there's the soccer travel on Sundays. So, which once again, like you can kind of dip in and dip out. So in the spring, they're doing all three.
So touching all, how do you, so when you're, getting pressure, it doesn't sound like the pressure comes from the hockey and the soccer, which is like, I'm curious your thoughts on that. Like, it sounds like the structure there allows for the prioritizing of baseball, right? Like the main sport. So when there's conflict or multiple things happening, what's your process? How do you work through that and decide where they go?
So because it's a school sport, that's our priority, right? And everything else is based around that in school. So, if they have a test, they're not going to go to practice, soccer practice during the week, because really they go to baseball practice right after school. And then I would pick them up from the baseball practice and drive them to the soccer practice.
Got you.
But if someone's got schoolwork the next day or a test and they can't do it, and their coaches understand, because really spring soccer is only 2 practices a week, games on Sundays. So we really pick the season, the sport that's in season. I mean, I would say all of my boys, their favorite sport is probably like hockey and soccer. And, next year they're playing, my son, I mentioned, is going away to prep school. So he can do all of the things in one place. Because this past year I was driving him an hour and 10 minutes, 3 nights a week for it was a 2-hour practice starting at 7 p.m. We didn't get home till like 11, so that was a lot, right, for him. And for me, he got, he's 16, so he got a lot of practice driving over the mountain to get there.
I think so pausing on that, we can segue in so many different directions in this place, and sharing whatever you feel comfortable, and like no pressure to share what you don't feel comfortable. This idea of like, we've had conversations around just like, why are you doing that? That's crazy. And one of the things that I think another intention of this space is to honor, like, each individual family has their set of values and what matters most to them. And that ultimately is the determiner of success, right? Like what matters most to your family, and are you living in alignment with that? And so when you're doing that and making that drive, or we were going, like an hour and 40 minutes to Connecticut for Kylie, it was like, the criticism of, why are you doing that? They're never going to go pro. They're not going to make it. Like, that's crazy. Like, how do you navigate that space and stay connected to what matters most? Yeah.
Well, I think some of it is, as a parent or as an adult, is realizing that our experiences shape us throughout our life, right? So it's not necessarily about the future. It's about the present and having the best experience we can in the present. Now, my oldest, it's the high school team is a co-op team, and he did play his freshman year, and, it just wasn't a good experience, and he's a kid who's devoted a lot of time to the sport. And all the kids that he had been playing with up to that point actually live in a different, like another town, and are a part of another co-op. So it would have been different if he was there with all the kids that he was playing with along the way, but he wasn't. And there were a lot of behavioral issues. And so that kind of got in the way of like actual practice, right? Like, if I have to pick him up early because practice is ended early because of behavioral issues, like, he actually wants to play, right? And this is really important to him. And we were kind of at that point that it was like, listen, These are kind of, you can play here out your high school career, and you can have a great experience, and we can make it the best experience that it can be.
Mm-hmm.
He got an opportunity to play for a AAA team over the mountain because they
Mm-hmm.
happened to need some kids, which is like kind of unheard of.
Mm.
And he went, and that's where he landed, and it was an amazing experience for him, and that's kind of had changed everything. And then the other
Mm-hmm.
conversation was, well, you could look at schools.
Mm-hmm.
If this is something that's really important to you, this was before he got the opportunity to play on the AAA team. And just look around to see if this is something you actually want,
Mm-hmm.
But either situation will make the best, the best
Mm.
out of it, right?
Yes,
Whether you
so
stay
beautiful.
or, maybe do you love hockey that much? Maybe if you don't want to go someplace else,
Mm-hmm.
but you don't want to play anymore either, like that's fine. Like,
That is it right there. So
well,
you're like what you're sharing is so powerful. I want to pause and just acknowledge it, of like checking in with your son or daughter, right?
yeah,
And actually asking them, like, what is it you're wanting? And then saying you're going to be okay regardless. So you're
yeah,
not feeling panicked or gripped or like, I have to do this. And because that, like, we've talked about like that, it's so easy to get sunk into that race of feeling like you're behind and you've
yeah.
got to do all these things. And it's like, nope, actually, you're going to be okay regardless. We'll make the best of it regardless. What is it that you're wanting to do and exploring?
Hmm.
That's just like provides such a level of freedom. And then they get to be the driver, right? Of like, actually, let me see
Yeah.
what it is that I'm wanting. Yeah. But to make that commitment and to be supportive, there is criticism around that. And
Hmm.
you look at the memes on social. I think part of the reason is I like to be a disruptor in the space of sport
Yeah.
parent conversations.
Hmm.
It's a lot of like, sport parents are psycho, they're ruining it, they're blaming, they're overbearing. And so you could look at our actions similarly, like the actions that we've taken similar to you, and say like, that's crazy, right? Like, back to like, he'll never go pro. And you know how I feel about it. I'll reserve for you to
Yeah.
share. But that, like, how, like, staying connected to what matters most and giving him space and doing that, like, how do you make that time in the car that, at the end of your day when you're serving people all day long and now you're in the car with them, like, what makes that worth it for you?
Um, you mean what makes it worth it?
That commitment that you're making to support
Oh,
him.
well, it's funny the things that it goes back to. I remember driving him over the mountain for the first time. The friendships,
Mm-hmm.
first of all, he came out. It was, he's got his headphones in on the way over,
Mm-hmm.
but on the way back, the headphones are out. He comes out and he's got a smile on his face, and he's in the car and he's super chatty. He's not necessarily talking about hockey, but the fact that he's even talking,
Mm-hmm.
my 16-year-old boy,
Yeah.
and with enthusiasm and excitement, I
Mm-hmm.
know he had a good experience.
Yeah.
And, I said to him, I did ask, I said, looking back at this experience, this year, actually, it's my father who asked him the
Mm.
question, what was your biggest like takeaway? And he said, I learned that I'm pretty good. And he is pretty good, but just not really being sure because he's never played AAA hockey. He's always been a
Mm.
good hockey player.
Mm-hmm.
He's always played with good kids. But because of where we live,
Mm-hmm.
it's never been a AAA team. And he's always played 3 sports. So this was an opportunity to get feedback from his
Mm-hmm.
coach, who's was an amazing guy. He's a former 7-year NHLer,
Mm-hmm.
kids on the team. So he's a family guy too.
Mm-hmm.
Just to give him this feedback
Mm-hmm.
was just, I think, it was just great to hear. And,
Mm-hmm.
and that's what makes it worth it,
Totally.
right?
Yeah. You see
Because those are
like,
things you're going to carry along
yeah.
the way in life.
And it's like that. There's a question that Brene Brown, I don't even remember where I heard her say it or read it. And it was like, what's worth doing even if you fail? So like, even if his goal was that, right? Or because the assumption is that there's just this like train you hop on. If you're going to make that level of commitment, it's just like one way to the top and that's it. Right. And it's like, that's like someone that's been to the top. Like that's like, you look around there and you're like, okay, if this is the only reason I'm doing it, like, is this really it? Right. So knowing
Yeah.
that, like, that may be the goal, it may not be the goal, but the pursuit at that level and the commitment that we're making to
Yeah.
support our kids, like there's so many powerful unlocks that happen in the journey, even if they never get where they want to
Yeah.
go. Yeah.
I I think also like with men's hockey especially, you know, it's I always say it's kind of saturated, right? There's all these kids who play hockey all year round, all the time, and then everyone always looks to college,
Mm.
right? Like that's like the end all be all. That's where and because I think there's 80 something Division 3 college hockey programs for men,
Mm-hmm.
and like 60 something Division 1 programs for men. So there's a big pool, and very few get
Mm-hmm.
through those doors. So I kind of think like that's also not a reason not to do it,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like everyone wants to just remind you or say, "Yo, it's very well,
The
yeah,
stats.
everyone,
Oh, totally.
it's,
I go back to that. I have such a strong reaction. I just like, I'm
yeah,
like, do I want to go? I don't know that there's healing that needs to be done there other than like, if someone had said that to my parents and they didn't give me permission to dream and believe that it was possible,
yeah,
because there's a chance that like, that's that defensive pessimism, if you will, right? That psychological
yeah,
concept where we try to protect ourselves from feeling disappointment if we don't get there.
hmm,
But is it really prevent, like, what's it do? It just keeps us small.
yeah,
So that permission slip of being able to say, like, so at any time I hear stats, I'm like, well, I like, two experiences come to mind. One is the stat that like a kid from Puberty, like, what's she going to do making the Olympic team? Like, I was the dark horse,
yeah,
not gonna happen statistically. And then two is like the statistics around my daughter's heart surgery. I'm like, so
hmm,
don't talk to me about statistics,
yeah,
because I'm
yeah,
just going to say no. Like, holding space for what's possible. The most important part there is that we're not looking for that experience to fill us or complete us
yeah,
or to make it. That just becomes the icing on the cake if it
yeah.
happens.
It's about the journey, not like the
100%.
you know,
Yeah, which is so cliche, but probably cliche because it's true and real, right?
yeah.
When you think about it. Yeah. Oh my goodness. So, okay, so the pulls to do all the things I hear where we're falling short. What when or hooking in. I also heard you mention that, like kind of clinging too tightly, getting really worried when it comes to our kids' experience, right, of
Hmm,
watching and not letting the
yeah,
natural unfurling happen. I've one of my she was my big sis at Michigan when I was there for a couple of years. She's like my behind the scenes question builder for the podcast. So Jen was looking up your information and the work you do in the world. And so she has questions for you that I'd love to toss your way too. And then we can just let it go wherever it goes. But her question, how do you talk about wellness or fitness to kids? So kind of bigger pictures, say zooming out.
So it's funny. I have sometimes I feel like I want to kids to try to have fun with it. I
Mm-hmm.
guess that find out what you like to do.
Mm-hmm.
I it's interesting because I listened to a podcast years ago. It was kind of on gym class and how I'm sure gym class has changed now. But you know how you used to do different units of different
Mm-hmm.
sports, but it doesn't necessarily teach people say whether how to work out or how to move their bodies
Mm-hmm.
in different ways. I mean, now of course like there's some weightlifting and there's yoga but find something you really like to do.
Mm-hmm.
I think that is one of the most because people tend to do things they like.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's a lot of talk about getting out of your comfort zone. I mean, the sky's the limit once you make a habit out of anything, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if my advice, or speaking to younger kids is figuring out like, do you want to be outside? Do you want to be inside? Like, there's having like a really growth mindset
Mm-hmm.
around what it means to be well, what it means to move,
Mm-hmm.
and getting away from those old like school things, no pain, no gain, or it has to be, you know, this is going off on a little bit of on a tangent, but I think sometimes it's also athletes, then trying to find balance and wellness because they
Yes.
used to like the cycles of the season or going all
Mm-hmm.
in, or if it's not like to the max and is it doing anything? And so,
Oh, I've
um,
been there. You're speaking to my
yeah.
former self. Totally. Yeah. That
So,
transition. Mm-hmm.
yeah. So with youth, it's really about getting in the habit of making it a priority
Mm.
too. Just as we go to school, we should be moving our bodies.
Mm-hmm.
Now
Yeah.
it doesn't
Yeah.
it can be, whether it's hiking, walking, it can be many things. It
And
doesn't have
integrating that too in the family. So like making time for that.
yeah.
Um, so to kind of skip a question and come back to the next one that she's asking, because this one's related, just like when your message to families, what is your message to families, moms and dads who are raising kids or racing kids to events and practice, trying to work, like how do we then manage and model that fitness and wellness? You are like, I was just speak to the fact like how dedicated you are. Oh, it's all good.
Well,
To this. Yeah.
I love this question because once again, you have to have a growth mindset around
Mhm.
it. Is this okay with the dog? I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
Yeah.
Okay. So one thing, I currently do, and my husband does this too. So if we're going to a game,
Mhm.
the kids have to be there 45 minutes in advance. So that's when we get our workout in, because then we can still sleep.
Yes.
You can sleep in. You don't have to get up extra early to get your workout in. I have a crate filled with dumbbells in my trunk.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
I just joined a Planet Fitness so that I can take my card and access it wherever, right? So I just did that the other day. Kelly, I dropped her off and I was like, I'll be back. And I haven't done that before. I didn't know you did that. Yeah. I would pressure myself to get up before we left, right? Or get it done or do it after or in between. And so this time I dropped her off,
Yeah.
got my workout. I felt so good. And I was so calm too when it came to
Well,
it.
you realize how valuable that little extra sleep is, and I think that is what is also important. So, and it doesn't have to be like the best workout, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, a lot of times I feel like it ends up being a great workout because you're so happy you did it.
You just stay outside? Is that what you do?
I'll go for a run, a walk. I have the I'll do a workout anywhere, and I don't care who's around. So I don't care how I look. I mean, hockey tournament parking lots.
Yeah.
I'll park by the grass. I'll park.
Sitting drinking beer while you're working out.
Right? And so, and I bring one set of dumbbells, that you kind of use for everything. I'll bring a band or whatever. And I'll do it right there. And I don't care who's looking at me.
That's amazing.
And I also don't care about being sweaty. Like you have to kind of lower the bar for what you can tolerate. Like if I have to drive home 3 hours and I feel a little gross, because I mean, the feeling of getting it done far outweighs like the sweaty feeling.
Oh my gosh, it's so good. Oh, I love that. And putting a crate in the car. I'm doing that.
Yeah.
Like, such a good idea.
And then I also, in the winter, we look to see when's our busiest time. Our busiest time, late night, is winter.
Yeah.
So we prioritize sleep.
Yeah.
So, but we make a conscious decision to say that I am prioritizing this. So the narrative isn't like, oh, I didn't get up. It's like, no, I'm not getting up because I'm prioritizing sleep. Beautiful. And so that's kind of but you have to be flexible and you have to kind of figure it out, like actually put it into action. A lot of people think about it, but they don't actually put it into action. It's like, just try it.
I love that. And the permission slip to do it and release that like fear of what people will think or the judgment around it. Yeah. And just getting started. Absolutely. All right. So coming back to her questions, what words do you use and what words or language do you try to steer clear from when it comes to fitness? And even kind of circling back to the beginning with just physical bodies as our kids' bodies are changing, like so from that perspective of how can we be best supporting our kids?
It's interesting. Everything too right now is really about, even like now, like, I'm in the menopause, perimenopause, and that's like all the buzz and all the things. And, everything's about macros and not changing like what you eat, but the amount, or like, the proportions of what you're consuming and for body, like how your body's going to look. Right.
I think Jen's going to want you to, we talked about that because we were talking about like, who's talking about like as we're raising kids, racing them all over the place, supporting them in their dreams, and also our bodies are changing. So like, where are we talking about that piece, right?
So on the way, to the game, you're listening to the podcast on perimenopause. It's like, oh, this is the hot flashes I'm feeling.
Yep.
But for me, I like to talk about being strong, feeling good in our body. Like even like if my middle son actually lets me work him out. And so I make him a lifting program, and he looks this kid's looking good. He is strong. He can do like pull-ups with a weighted vest, like 4 sets of 8, like he's a little guy. It's great. I really I love it. Right. And I love it for him, but that feeling in your body, of what it can do, not the way it looks.
Yes. Yeah, that's it.
I try to,
it's so important. It's so important. And it's so, That's a conversation. Like, this is probably another podcast episode we could record just around coaches having that conversation, because many that I work
Hmm.
with won't go near it, right? Or they'll, if they're
Yeah.
lucky, they have an RD that's in the support or care team circle that can have those kinds of conversations. But that idea of like dropping all the old school noise around what a body or an athlete's body should look like,
Yes. Yeah.
releasing that and saying, no, my
Hmm.
body's not for judging, right? That
Yeah.
book from the Kite Sisters. I don't, did you read that,
Yeah.
More Than a Body? It's
No,
so
but a friend of mine gave it to me, and
so
I have
good.
it sitting next to my bed.
And just the
Kind of
cover. You just
funny.
need to put the cover on
Yeah.
your bookshelf,
Or
because
the
the cover says, right? Like,
yes.
my body is
Yeah.
not an ornament. It's an instrument, right? Exactly what you're
Hmm.
saying. So that idea of so focusing on language that is talking about what the body's able to do and how it feels.
Yeah, and how you
Yeah.
feel, when it feels to like be strong. Like, in hockey right now for my middle, he could just check for the first time this year, and
Oh,
what it
yeah.
feels like to feel strong. And this year, when post puberty and him lifting some weights versus like last year, the confidence that kind of comes along I always say, when you give to your body, it gives back to you like tenfold,
That's so
you
beautiful.
know.
I love
So,
that.
but so that's been, but yeah, the whole
No, that's
female
so
look.
beautiful. That
Yeah.
crosses all, and that probably, like, because if you think of in any given week, the people that you're serving, right? Like, range,
Yeah.
like, so just paint that picture for people, because I know, but you'll do a better job of speaking, giving justice to who you serve and the wide range of people,
Oh,
from
so
moms, right? Yeah. So
yeah,
yeah,
it's fascinating right now. I always say I'm a jack of all trades because
yeah.
I work a little bit with everybody. But so it's from like my son and some high school athletes I work with
Hmm.
locally. Some girls I got the privilege of working with, which is a lot of fun. To cancer patients, right? That which are very much like their journeys, very much like being an athlete, right? Like
Hmm.
there's so many different phases and stages of what they're doing and how they need to, look after their body and pay attention to their body,
Hmm.
is so important. So, I work with, some that are, post treatment, in treatment, some are end of life.
Hmm.
So just seeing the body through all those different stages is kind of fascinating.
Hmm.
And then I have found, like, even with the elderly, I, I always say I love college kids. They're my favorite,
Mm.
but I love like elderly people.
Yeah.
I mean, and they need so much love. Like, so
Mm.
when they're working out, like you look at their bodies and what they've been through,
Mm.
they tell a story.
Totally.
So giving, like, but it still needs movement, right? And it still needs love, and it still needs
Mm.
care. So, um, it's been like almost like a privilege too to watch people age and to
Hmm.
see different bodies at different times, or someone's body at 70 and another person's body at 70, and how they differ. So scientifically, it's kind of interesting. Oh, what have
Yeah.
you done, or and how people take care of themselves. So, I've seen a little bit of everybody. I mean, I tend to see mainly women.
Hmm.
Um, and I have to say, one of the best things about it is, once again, this piece from the beginning is this connection that you make with people
Hmm.
through movement and through body work, right?
That, and I just hear so loudly that for you, this like movement is love. Like,
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's like a
Hmm.
form of love. It's like part of also like your love language, pouring into people, helping them love themselves. Like, there's just like that word is coming through so
And I
strong.
and
Yeah.
I think too, like in any given day, like I could be with some high school girls, right, who are in this special time in their life, right, and the
Hmm.
excitement and this and that, to someone who is in their 80s and maybe even close near end of life, right? And
Hmm.
just these different, it's just kind of, you get a full circle of what life is almost on a daily basis,
So
which is
powerful.
kind of interesting,
It gives you such rich perspective. Yeah.
it really does.
Yeah.
I don't always sit and reflect on it.
Yeah.
But I do feel kind of blessed to have that experience, I guess, on a
Mhm.
day-to-day basis.
It's amazing. Well, they're so blessed to have you too. Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Yes. All right. Back to Jen's questions here. So just looking at like high level athletes that you've worked with, do you see any things that they have in common? That's one of the questions that she's asking.
Yeah, they're fast. Right? I mean, I think of like a lacrosse player at Dartmouth, and he ended up, he had 1 year of eligibility, so he went to Duke, and like speed of play, right? Like,
Yeah.
so if I had to look at, say, from that perspective, people are fast, right?
Yeah.
The higher level, the faster level of play, whether it's like also like youth hockey, right? AAA versus speed of play is a huge thing. I would say like the overall, like, some people are freaks of nature. I feel like going to Clemson, some people just roll up and they're specimens, right?
That I think when I think of that, Michael Phelps, who was a teammate.
Yeah.
I'm like, whoa, okay.
Some people just, they've got it, right?
Yeah.
But I think at a high level, it's this consistency that stems from, I think, you're on a team and you're growing up, it becomes like a team aspect to a real individual personal thing, right? Where they take their performance to the next level. And a lot of it is based on what they're doing on their own and what they're thinking and what they're feeling. Like it is such like a, they're locked in, right? And that's why I use the specimen thing, because I feel like there's some people that just come out and they can like perform, right? But I think when people get to this next level, like their life, what they think and what they do, it's all aligned. They all seem to have that thing, right?
Yeah.
Like no one needs to tell them what to do. They're seeking out, they're coachable also. So they're seeking out like advice, like what mental, physical, all the things. And it becomes like, being a team player to being, it's individualized.
Totally.
Right?
So there's like the drive. Totally.
Yes. The drive is there to like get to that next level.
And when you think about like, we can start to wind this down to like kind of bringing it back to parents around like the practice of permission slips, like when we are to honor them, the humans that we're raising as humans first. So seeing them as whole humans who are striving in sport, right? And seeing them and honoring their development. When they have that piece, that drive, or even if they don't, kind of meeting them wherever they are, what are permission slips? Like, what do we want to be writing permission slips for us to do or not do in terms of like what you believe based on your experience and wisdom?
So what I really believe is balance, right? So what that looks like is if you are really locked into one thing, well, what else do you like to do? Who else are you?
Yeah.
If you aren't your sport, right? It's a big piece of your life and who you are and what you do. But I think the biggest piece is, well, what else you got? Like, what else do you like to do? What else is important? And really sometimes like, I think it's good to have more than one thing, whether it's like sports in school or like a hobby or
baking.
Like,
my girls love baking.
Yes,
Right?
or to hike or like, what would you feel if you didn't have your sport? What would you fill your time with?
Yes, that's so important.
And I think that if you have like that kind of answer, then I think it's also very freeing because then it also becomes a choice.
Yeah.
Right? Like
100%.
I'm not doing this just because I'm good at it. I do this because I want to do it. But hey, I'm really good at all these other things too, or things I really like and enjoy. So I think for my kids, it's always kind of like, well, what else? What else? Sometimes I'm always like, well, what do you like besides sports? What else do we get?
Right. That's so real.
Yes.
Yeah. No, I love that piece of, so permission, getting curious. So what that requires of us then is not getting locked into like, because it's easy in the day to day, like here's our rhythm, we're in the groove, we're like doing the thing, we're like, we become almost like that identity of like hockey parent, soccer parent.
Yeah.
Like, and even in this like the culture within each sport is different. And so being able to watch that over identification on our end to give space of like, I see you. What else do you like to do? Like, who are you beyond this? Yeah.
Yes. And whether it's even like hanging out with friends, like my mom always said, you have to join a club. You need to,
I love that.
So like that, and that's something easy because it's school related, right?
Right.
It's like right there. But just finding some other interests and hobbies,
Yeah.
I think is important, right?
I love that. Yeah. What would you say, sport? This is a loaded one, so you can take this one and be short with it or go with it. Like, what if, like, your greatest challenge, like in this role of sport parent, what's been something that's kind of tested you or your greatest challenge, and what have you learned from that?
Well, one is balance, right? The balance of all the things. I have 3 kids.
Mm-hmm.
So I think for me, I'll speak to like this year. I have a son that my oldest who had a great season, visited a lot of schools, and made a conscious decision to go away to school, which I'm very happy for him because that's what he wants. But then it immediately makes me, think about how it's going to impact my other two.
Yeah.
And then I go, well, say if they want to go away,
Mm-hmm.
you know. And it actually affected us immediately. So this year, my 2 younger ones were like, we want to try out for AAA teams.
Mm.
So allowing them to do that, knowing that it's gonna be a longer season, it's gonna, and they both got permission to still play soccer in the fall. So the stress that's going to put on to us, but how can I say no? It'd be very easy for my middle son to be like, just do one more year here and then you can go. But if I'm letting my oldest go and have all these new experiences, how can I say no to the other two? So,
Yeah.
so it's the balance of all, I think too, is all your kids, because they're also different with different personalities and they need different things.
Which is that's like a blanket for parenting too.
Yeah.
That's it. Yeah. And where do you though say no? What is a yes? Like again, orienting to what matters most to you with your values and your family. Yeah. So that yes.
And one thing that's one reason too with my oldest going away playing in 3 sports, like, we live in a town where, which, part of it is people love that everybody makes a team, for the high school, but sometimes there can be too many doors open, right? Because if a door is always open, how do you know to open another one? So, the issue, for our oldest is with him going away is maybe some doors might close. And if they close him, that will be a good experience. And maybe he'll find what he's truly passionate about.
That's so beautiful.
And so, I'm kind of hoping for that with him instead of being like, oh, you can't play all the things. This is his way of like seeing, well, what do I like, so, cause doors are going to, at this higher level, doors will close for sure. And there's a lot of growth there.
Just your frame on that is so powerful. Like, can you see that? That perspective?
Well,
it's like mirroring that back to you is so incredibly powerful because that could elicit like a sense of, I see it in the parents that I work with and interact with of like I don't want that, like that would be bad, like a door closing and not seeing how you, like the lens with which you view it is, it's beautiful. Like he'll discover more of what he loves.
Yeah, I got cut from basketball and I ran and look what happened.
Right.
There's so many things that can happen, but we don't always allow those things to happen, and so it's like those curated kind of experiences. And
oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So like this, I can't wait to just like, there's so many quotes from you and this, like what this sentiments more so than a quote, like to pull from and literally like put on a Post-it to remind myself too on this journey. So powerful. So anything else that you would like to share when it comes to this conversation we're in? Like, it's not us talking down to people, it's talking with people, right? Of other fellow sport parents, maybe even some coaches that are listening.
Well, I just think that, sports, it's something our kids do, and let them have the experience, whether it's like you're going to have a bunch of different coaches. Like we've all had great coaches, we've all had not so good coaches, but you can take a little bit of something from everyone as long as you can have a conversation about it, right? And be in the awareness, well, so-and-so is a little bit more like this. So it doesn't have to always be a negative, there's a lot of growing, and learning what works for you, so I just think it's, with parents being so busy and kids being so busy with sports, don't forget to have the conversations.
Yeah.
I mean, that's where the lessons are learned, is by talking about them.
Mm-hmm.
So using, whether, it sounds cliche, that time in the car,
Mm-hmm.
but really talking to your kids about, about the experience,
Mm-hmm.
because you can apply it, throughout life, into everything. So that's
Mm-hmm.
the biggest thing is, I try never to, I do have to say, well, after all of my kids' games, I always say, "Did you have fun?"
Yeah.
I really do say that. And a lot of them, they always say, because I do always say, "Oh, you played great." And like, you always say that. And I think sometimes is because not every game is going to be your best game.
Mm-hmm.
And so they know that's a part of the journey too.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't play well. That's all right. Not every game is going to be your best game.
Mm.
So getting comfortable with having the highs and the lows, and not letting that, they always say, like, the most successful people are the ones that can get back on the horse the
It's
fastest.
so real.
They
Mm-hmm.
don't sit there and think about, oh my God, they
Mm-hmm.
get back on and keep it moving. So
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that is what, I would say is these setbacks, or, all the complicated things about sports are really all teaching moments, right?
Totally.
But you have to
It's,
have the conversations,
mm-hmm.
and and have fun. If it's not fun,
Yeah.
it's really, and I don't know with your experience too, but it's really hard to be really successful if there's
Oh,
no fun.
totally. 100%. I say, like, sports should bring more joy than stress. And it's going to bring stress purposefully, right? But like at the end of the day, if there's not more joy, absolutely. Like when we're not going to be able to, if we're so bound in stress, we're not going to be able to access flow in our best performances. That's real.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and,
Yeah.
and
And
yeah, practice. I always say, if your kid's probably not running on the off season, they may not really like to run that much.
totally. Yeah.
I don't know.
So following their lead. Oh my gosh, there's so much wisdom in here. I cannot wait to listen to this back and like mine it for gold. Really. And it's so clear that you're leading with love, and the space that your kids' journeys are your kids' journeys, like giving them that space. And then the normalization too of just like, there's ebbs and flows, and there's things that
Yeah.
we can learn here, and reconnecting to the original intent behind it, which is like, let's go have fun and play. So, oh my gosh.
Can I just add one more
Yeah,
thing?
yeah, yeah.
All right. So my only other thing I would, as your kids get older, like high school, college, like, you don't have the relationships with the coaches or the
Mm-hmm.
day-to-days as much.
It's
And a
real.
lot of parents make assumptions about what is going on,
Mm-hmm.
and get a little bit nervous, like, oh, is my kid not getting playing time, or this
Mm-hmm.
and that, or, well, everyone's good. There's too many kids on the team. Everyone's got to sit at some point. So instead of like getting like really worked up about it, just kind of, once again, like, let's see how things like kind of flow,
Mm-hmm.
like, because we tend to get, sports parents tend to get really wired, real
Mm-hmm.
fast,
Mm-hmm.
and just kind of let things play out at times,
Mm-hmm.
instead of getting so worked up, because a lot of times we don't really know what's going on,
Mm-hmm.
because you're not there, especially college. You're not there on the day to day,
Mm-hmm. It's pumping that brake. That's the skill
Yeah.
set. Like
hmm
being able to pump the brake, take space, challenge stories we're telling ourselves. Yeah, that's our inner
Yeah.
work for sure. Oh my gosh, so much. So, where can people find you, follow you, work with you? Like, where would
Well,
you?
I'm not really on any social media, like pumping myself. That's like a
You have a
goal of
website, a
mine.
beautiful website. Yeah,
So,
we'll drop your
so I
your
have, I
website.
have a
Yeah,
website, so you can go
yeah.
to my website. I don't really advertise my work on social media. I kind of more tend to work local, not because for any reason, out of laziness, pretty much, or still learning to
If
put
someone,
myself
if
out
someone
there.
was, could you support someone virtually? Like, is that
Yes,
an
yes,
option?
I can
Yeah,
support
yeah. I
someone
thought so.
virtually. And yeah, so my website would be the best way, Bayliss
Okay,
Amanda. No, Amanda Bayliss. I don't even know my website name. Amanda
I'll
Bayliss.
drop it in the show notes.
AmandaBayliss.com. But yeah, and I feel like like you feel, sports is like, in your sport is everything, every day,
Oh my
all
gosh.
around you.
Well, and then back to the original, like like the people. And so
Yeah.
that's right. Like we literally met at Gym Fest, which is a gymnastics center. And then
And
that was where we would circle
and then
into,
Rob works with my boys,
yeah. Oh.
doing the strength and conditioning,
Mhm.
which, once again, I value so much,
Mhm. And the
because
time and
that
the
is something
growth.
they can take the rest of their life,
100%. Oh my gosh, so
and
much
so you
so.
learn to do it right, you can do it forever.
Amazing. Oh my gosh, thank you so much. We could talk forever, so I'm gonna stop us now. Oh.